Good morning, everyone. My name is Hamed Lawal. I'm from Nigeria. I had my bachelor's in Nigeria, and currently I'm taking my master's at the University of Turku in Finland here, and also University of Regensburg. So the master's is a double degree program, which I had to take a part of the program in University of Turku, then the other part of the program at the University of Regensburg. So the reason why I used University of Regensburg in my submission is because during this period I will be in Germany. So I traveled from Germany to Helsinki last Sunday for this particular program. So this is why I have two universities and I'm representing two universities. My topic is integrating podcasting into teaching low resource context. Um, I I was a secondary school teacher. I started teaching at a very early stage of my life. I had my teacher's registration certificate in 2016 after my national certification in education. And then I had my bachelor's degree, which I completed in 2021. And then in 2022, I participated in some British Council programs, and I was awarded the Best Teacher in Sub-Saharan Africa that year. That was 2022. Then also that same year, I got my IGCSE certification to teach IGCSE English in Nigeria, which these were my students then. Then now I'm currently taking my double degree program in University of Turku and University of Regensburg. I, I don't have lots of research publications. I had just two, and you can find them on ResearchGate. Then I have a book on Amazon. Then I co-authored a book with a teacher in Nigeria as well. And these are my hobbies. I love sports, table tennis for fun. Then I love traveling and writing. And at the same time, I make videos. So that's a little bit about me. And let's quickly move into the business for today. So this is what you're going to learn from this best practice workshop. So number one is how do we effectively use podcasts for classroom teaching? Then number two is how to set up a classroom podcast studio. So which I did while I was teaching in Nigeria. We used to have a very small place where we used to for students to do a short podcast presentation, and it was very small and low resource, and that's where the idea of low resource context came in. Then we have podcasting for professional development. Me personally, I have learned a lot from podcasts. I listen to podcasts regularly, and I would show you some of my favorite podcasts, which you can also try to listen to for teaching professional development. Where does the word podcast, where does it come from? Has anybody heard of podcast? I'm sure. Yeah. Have we used it before in the class, or we use it personally? Personally, yeah. So we can integrate it into the classroom as well, because many of our learners, they listen to podcasts, and we need to tailor our teaching towards what the learners do on a daily basis. Initially, we used to have, learners used to play games a lot. Then some professors, some scholars, they brought in game-based learning, where learners can learn from the games they like playing. So in this case, we have, due to iPhones, smartphones, so many of our learners, they listen to podcasts on a daily basis. But what kind of podcast do they listen to? So we teachers, we can bring up a podcasting studio to make the learners have access to them, even when they are learning to their favorite podcast. They can also listen to their teacher's podcast as well and remember things that was said by the teacher. Then the idea of podcast is a blending of two words, iPod and broadcast, which made up podcast. We also have the video based podcasting. So it's not just audio, it could be video as well, just like what I'm doing. So you make a video, you edit the video, and then you make it short and you upload it for students to go through those videos after the presentation. So I have read some research papers about the use of podcasts in the classroom, how it was carried out. The first one is the Alchemist Manifesto. You can check it on your phone. You see lots of ideas from these podcasts. And then there is a research around the effectiveness of podcasts as well in according to this research. So it shows that podcast is becoming a necessary tool we should use in our classroom on a daily basis. Okay, how it started. Uh, we used to have radios in our houses in the past, and the criticism against radio was that when you listen to it now, you won't have the chance to listen to it again, and that's all. If you miss a news, you have to you have to look for somebody to tell you what has been said in the news. But these days, podcast has made it very easy for you to listen at your own pace and time. Yeah, we have a lot of authentic podcasting ideas on the internet now, which you can integrate into your class, into the classroom topics. So it's not just because I used it for language teaching, I used it for English language teaching. That doesn't mean you can't use it for arts, or you can't use it for sciences or any subject, history. You can always use podcasts for anything. You want to teach about World War II, you use the historical and cultural podcast. So I would talk about the difference between podcast and podcasting. So we have climate podcast that talks about climate. We have podcasts that talk about language, English language or Finnish language or any language. Then we have the news and the teaching professional development podcast. Next. I want to ask you, why should we integrate podcasts into the classroom? Is it really necessary? Now, this is an article I got, and it answered this question in, let's say, two ways. The first one is learning. We need podcasts because we need to learn. We need to bring up autonomous learning, not just the teacher doing the learning because things are changing. We need to make the learners be autonomous learners. They should be able to learn independently without the teachers. And that's why we need podcasts. So this paper talks about how to start up a podcasting uh, studio for learning purpose. So you can check out this after this um, presentation. Then the second one is for reflection, reflective purposes. So we teachers, we need to look back on how we teach in order to re-strategize, in order to replan. Yeah, and that's the next one here. In order to replan, in order to rethink about how we teach. And this particular paper talks about student teachers reflection. It was carried out in University of Jyväskylä here in Finland. So it talks about how student teachers use podcasts to reflect their teaching methods. While I was doing my teaching practice in 2015, my supervisor was sitting at the back and I was teaching. And then after the teaching, everything, they said, wow, nice presentation. It was okay. It was that and that. Then at the end of the presentation, I was thinking about what did I do? I was thinking of, I presented, then after presenting, I was thinking about what did I do well and what didn't I do well. I only heard people talking, oh, it was a nice presentation. The presentation was nice, but it's not enough for me to reflect on the way I teach. So I need something to reflect on how my teaching. That's why I'm making this video for myself, So when I get home, I look at it again, then I think about my presentation, I look at the things I can improve on and things I can do better. So this particular paper is very, very effective, is an example of reflective practices. And there is also someone in this conference, Cecilia Nober. She's somebody I follow on LinkedIn. I don't know if she's not here. She's from the UK. She's presenting a video-based observation, how to observe yourself as a teacher using video-based. Instead of you waiting for somebody to give you a report about your teaching, you can do a short video-based observation and you'll be able to reflect. And that's the second reason why we should integrate podcasting into the classroom. Remember, podcasting is not just an audio tool, it can also be a video tool as well. Next one. So according to Richard Sin 2006, it describes podcasting as a simple to use technology. And this is where we are going to today. So I brought up these two features, digital features, which include it's a digital content. It's easy to subscribe. It is shareable. You can play it back and you can always listen to it anywhere. It is mobile. Then we have the pedagogical features like engagement for classroom engagement. Since I use podcasts in my classroom, my students always fall in love with my class. They always want me to continue teaching even after the period is over because I allow them to even make their podcast in the classroom themselves, which I'm going to show you how I did it. Then the next one is flexibility. It is flexible. Autonomy. Learners can learners can make podcasts themselves, and also they can always listen to what they've learned after the classroom. Then we have skills development. They develop their language skills, they develop their speaking, their listening skills, their reading and writing skills. So it covers all the skills. Then creativity. It also helps to fascinate creativity, which is the um, present day issue that we have to face as teachers today, creativity. Technology has taken over everything. The only thing technology cannot take over is creativity. So how can we introduce critical thinking, creativity skills into our classroom? And this is you asking your students some questions that could generate them to think critically and not ask ChatGPT. Next slide. So I'm going to skip this particular part. This is just to ask you what are the activities you could put into your classroom uh, using podcasts, but I'm going to skip it because of time. Then the next. Yeah, so I was talking about podcasts or podcasting. Podcasts are the ready-made resources, ready-made tools, while podcasting is you making your podcast as the teacher. So I call it teacher-made podcast and already-made podcast. So we want to look at the teacher-made podcasts. Next. Next. Okay, so these are methods you could use while you are making your podcast. You use I use, or should I say, you use open-ended or close-ended questions, and you can ask the students to prepare for the topic, allow them to provide their findings about the topic that you ask them to talk about. Then you ask them some open-ended questions, which it will be recorded, like who, what, where, why, and how. Next. And then students can also summarize while they are creating their podcast. They can summarize your seminar topic. Like after teaching, then you call on the students to summarize the classroom topic for that day. They summarize it for you, and you record. Script writing, it helps them to learn about how to prepare their presentation. Then classroom podcast studio, which we're going to talk about. Then you can also distribute roles among the students. Okay, you are the script writer, you are the editor, you are the main presenter, you are the supporting presenter, and then they come out of the class, they present, then the audience listen, they ask questions, and it makes the class to be more interesting and engaging. Next. So these are impacts for low resource context. So when I say low resource context, I don't just mean African context or places where where technology is still coming up. It even affects the Finland context as well, because Finland is looking at how to minimize resources, and they don't want to overutilize resources. So when I mean low resource context, I mean context where um, you don't want to you are not expecting some technologies that are not available. So learners can download on their mobile phone, they can subscribe. It is cheap and everywhere. It is appealing, it's reusable, and so on. Also for CPDs. Instead of you traveling from one country to the other for CPDs, you can always listen to podcasts and even learn more about your teaching profession. Next. So setting up podcasts in the classroom. Next one. So what are the things you need? The first thing you need is your smartphone or your computer, whichever one. And the reason why you need your smartphone is to use the camera and also to use the mic and next. Then these are the softwares. I use this. You can search it on Play Store or Apple Store. Then you see this Spotify. Then I also found this also very useful. You can also use Audacity and also this. So I've used this and this, but I haven't used this and this in the classroom. But I found out that these two softwares are also very effective. And you can download them on your phone and use it to next. Then you need your microphone. This is my microphone, very small. And the reason why you need microphone is to reduce the noise around the classroom, because noise from other classes can always come in, which you need a microphone to minimize the noise. So you need this microphone. You can get it on maybe AliExpress or any online store. Next. Yeah, you need sound effects to make it interesting. Then next. And you need a loudspeaker, maybe a very small MP3 speaker. After the presentation, you can always play it for the students. Then the next one, yeah, for CPDs generally, finally, next, last slide. This is very important. These are places where you could get important teacher-based podcasting resources for development, for your own professional development. Teacher Talks Radio, these two websites, and also these links. So these are the references. You should. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you, Hamdan. Now
Yeah.
I think we have about 8 minutes because we will take the timetable so that everybody has equal time.
Mhm.
So okay, now we have time for questions or thoughts what you heard, and please first I want to ask you that we have in our conference booklet the abstracts, but is it possible also to share the slides?
Yep.
If somebody wants, okay.
Yeah.
So we can also do that. But
All right.
please, audience, what kind of ideas or thoughts if you have all?
Thank you so much.
I get that you participate.
Yeah.
And you say yes, that's one from the student. But I just want to know whether you take into account the attributes of the student, their learning style, because not everything technology can suit everybody. Maybe he's a type of kinesthetic, or maybe a visual, or maybe it is auditory. So how do you blend them or make sure that all those your student is different learning style to be able to accept that as a means of teaching?
Yeah. So sometimes it's very difficult to identify the learning style of a student, because there are some students with multimodal learning style. They have more than one learning style. And recently, when I was there was a learning environment course that I did in University of Turku. So our professor, when I asked her about learning style, she said we teachers should not talk about specific learning style because it is difficult to say that I am a audiovisual learner or it's according to our own research. She said it's difficult and we should develop the learning styles with the students. If a student has reading and writing learning style, that shouldn't limit the students. We should not limit the students to that learning style by saying because you like reading and writing, and I will only present you with reading and writing. We should make it multimodal so that they would always be able to adapt in every situation they find themselves. Yeah. So using podcasts, for example, if a student doesn't like listening, then it's a very good tool to introduce to that student. So we should not say that because the student is bad at listening, then we don't want to show him how to listen or present to him how to listen. Yeah. Thank,
That's why I expected you to.
thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, please, Lara.
It's a very good presentation.
Thank
We have now known a different way of engaging our learners in
Mhm.
our class. I haven't tried it. Maybe I'll take some inspiration to try with my maybe. But one question that I have is you said podcasting is done in two ways. One is podcast and one is podcasting. Where you someone else's podcast and use it in your class or you do podcasting yourself. But I somehow see in your presentation there's also third way where podcasting is done by students.
Mm.
Not just the teacher, students also making podcasting.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what is it that you tried in your classroom? Did students do the podcast or did you do the podcast and then you have
Presentation.
how did you do that?
Okay, I did the podcast for myself to see how I teach, and also my students they did the podcast. I remember the literature by William Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. So the textbook has the dramatic part of the what's it called, Romeo and Juliet. Then we recorded it. So they take some roles and they speak like the characters. Then after everything, we edited the presentation and we merge everything together. It looks um, like a dramatic thing, which is a very good way to engage the learners to let them fall in love with your subject. Yeah, and then you can use it for
How do you think what they have done now is different from a drama?
Mm.
Like that's
yeah,
enacting a play. Then how do you think what is different from a drama to a
podcast. I didn't see any difference between the difference between podcast and drama could be that drama is live and you don't need to edit anything, but in podcast you need to edit some things away from because podcast is should be engaging. Like I have to edit this video from area where I say lot of harms. You remove those parts. You remove those parts where you didn't say anything to make the podcast very short and target to the main point. You understand? Yeah, that is. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you.
I would be one of the children who would be too scared to speak and hear my own voice on the podcast.
Mhm.
Maybe it's good to encourage the children to do that. And my question though is like I'm trying to think about how this might be, for example, instructions to school
Hmm.
and this type of thing, is it as a way that you
Hmm. Yeah, it's a very good way to catch up with students during maybe COVID-19 or during any closure, because the reason why it is very effective is that there is you can always as a teacher you can have a website for yourself. You can create a short blog for yourself and put in your podcasts there for the student to always go there to listen, or your lessons should always be in each of the blogs. Then the students can always go back there to listen to you and follow up with your teaching from there. And also, if you're using the softwares that I shared initially, there is a place where you can upload your podcasts, and then the students can subscribe to that page. Then they always follow up with you from there. But you can't use this podcast alone. You need to it's just an integrative tool. You integrate it into your learning environment. You can't just use it directly for the students. So you still have to assess, you still have to ask questions, which you need some other learning environments to engage those parts. Yeah. But for presentation purpose, I think podcast is very good.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Mr. Hamad Lawal. Thank you. And our next presentation